Suparikar Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Radha Govinda Ji Ki Jai. Jai Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Ji Ki Jai. Jai Shri Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai. Jai Shri Shri Nitai Gauranga Ki Jai. Jai Shri Nrsinga Bhagavan Ki Jai. Jai Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Shri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnu Pad Shri Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnu Pad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Saparikar Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Mahabhagavat Srila Gaura Kishore Das Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Srila Sachidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Vaishnava Sarvabhaum Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Shri Gauri Vedanta Charya Baladev Vijibhusan Prabhu Ki Jai. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Ki Jai. Srila Narottam Srinivas Shyamananda Prabhu Trai Ki Jai. Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Das Raghunath Shata Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Srila Swarup Damodar Roy Ramanandari Gaur Parsada Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sigo Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Go Govardhan Dvarashavanatmaka Shri Braj Mandala Dham Ki Jai. Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Yamuna Ganga Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Jiu Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Kshetra Dhama Ki Jai. Bhakti Vigna Vinashana Shri Nrsinga Deva Ki Jai. Bhakta Prabhu Shri Prahlad Maharaj Ki Jai. Charodam Charu Sampradaya Charu Acharya Ki Jai. Akara Matraj Shri Chaitanya Mat Ki Jai. Or Ananya Shaka Mat Samuha Ki Jai. Jai Shri Vishva Vaishnava Raj Sabha Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Bhuvana Pavana Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai. Shri Bhuvana Mangala Harinam Prabhu Ki Jai. Hare Krishna Maha Mantra Ki Jai. Sachinandana Gaura Hari Ki Jai. Shri Nityananda Mahajana Ki Jai. Shri Pancha Tattva Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jataha Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shivishakhanvitamscha Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunamilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shri Guru Dinataranam Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Yeah, you can all chant if you want. Namo Mahabhadanaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tishe Nama He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vrindai Tulsi Debai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Ashto Tarasata Sri Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada, and that I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat Pranams and Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Ashtatara Sata Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sri Dhara Goswami Maharaj, and Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Ashto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, and my Dandavat Pranams to all my Sri Sri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga, and my Dandavat Pranams to all of the Vaishnavas and all of the Vaishnavis. Sri Upadeshamrita, third shloka, Utsahan Nishchaya Dhairyat Tatat Karma Pravartanat Sangatyaga Sato Vritte Sadbir Bhakti Prasiddhyati. So in this third shloka of Sri Upadeshamrita, Srila Rupa Goswami is listing the 6 activities that are favorable for bhakti. So we've already heard Srila Sachidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur's explanation of the first 4. Now we're studying the 5th item, which is what? Sangha Tyagat. You can all say Sangha Tyagat. So, what does Sangha Tyagat mean?
To give up unfavorable association.
That's correct. Relinquishing.
Relinquishing.
He uses the word. So, yesterday, we were hearing about the duties of a householder Vaishnava in terms of association. We also heard before that the duties of a renunciate in terms of association with the opposite sex and also with those who are materialists. And we've heard about many different types of association with jnanis, karmis, and so forth, which are not favorable for bhakti. In fact, if someone comes under the sway of that unfavorable association, they may be taken very far away from bhakti. So association is practically one of the most important principles for Vaishnavas. Actually, we know from the Shastras, there's a particular verse that has been quoted by Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and that shloka is talking about, and you mentioned it one day, about a gem, how a gem reflects what's next to it, right? The colors, like if you have a crystal, and then what you put next to it, it will reflect those colors. And this is the example used for the living entities. The living entities, the jivas, are affected by association. So, association is the main principle for the jivas. The main principle. What you associate with, it will affect you either positively or negatively. And that's why the acharyas, that's why the shastras have given so many different rules and regulations how we can live in such a way that we will not be adversely affected by negative association that will diminish our bhakti. And then on the other side, the positive association will do what? Oh, it will enhance our bhakti unlimitedly. So, actually, in every stage of bhakti, association is required. From the beginning of Shraddha, then comes what? Sadhusanga. Sadhusanga appears in a jiva's life because of certain factors from previous lives. There is a shloka that says, Bhaktistu Bhagavad Bhakta Sangena Parijayate. Bhaktistu Bhagavad Bhakta Sangena Parijayate. Where does bhakti come from? Here this verse is telling, Bhaktistu Bhagavad Bhakta Sangena. By the Sangha of a Bhagavad Bhakta. That's where bhakti arises. This is the cause. Then, Satsanga Prapyate Pumbir Sukritar Purva Sanchitai. Satsanga Prapyate. A person attains satsanga with such a Bhagavad Bhakta. How? Sukritar Purva Sanchitai. We all heard the word Sukriti. And here it's saying that the accumulation of Bhakti Unmukha Sukriti is not telling in the verse, but this is what it's referring to, Bhakti Unmukha Sukriti. That is the cause of getting sadhusanga. While we wander throughout the universe, in many, many different species of life, and in many, many human bodies, one after the other. The sukriti that we've accumulated in the course of our wandering, this determines whether or not someone will attain sadhu sangha. Did you know that? Damodar, did you know that? That that's what determines? So it's not by chance. Never, ever. Anything is by chance. Of course, we know that there's also the conception of causeless mercy. Yes? Is there such a thing as causeless mercy? That just mercy and has no cause, just happens. Is there?
Megari the hunter?
Yes. That's just one of millions. See. But one thing is that Rupa Goswami explains very elaborately how the Sukriti is attained not only in human bodies, but also in animal species and so forth. This is the arrangement of the causeless mercy of the Lord and of the pure devotees. That Sukriti is called what? In the lower species. When an animal eats some Krishna prasadam, this is a type of Sukriti for that entity, for that jiva. What is it called? What type of Sukriti is it? Agyata. Agyata means not knowing. Not knowing. Agyata Sukriti. Now, in the course, this is directly coming from Rupa Goswami, in the course of that jiva's sojourn in various species of life, and even in human bodies, they accumulate more and more of this agyata sukriti, unknowing sukriti. They accumulate. So then what happens? When that accumulation becomes sufficient, then they get some association with sadhus, with holy places, with holy times, and so forth. And then, gradually, they begin to attain some faith in dharmic practices. They attain. And then, that Sukriti enables them to begin on the pathway of bhakti with a drop of Shraddha, with the association of sadhus. Then they begin to practice, and knowingly, consciously, knowingly, that's called Gyata Sukriti, now they begin to engage in bhakti. But there's many levels of Gyata Sukriti. So, this is just a general overview. Satsanga prapyate pumbir sukritayar purva sanchitaya. That satsanga, sadhu sangha, is attained by previous life sukriti. So there's always a thread there. We see even in some of the pastimes of the Lord, certain demons, they also achieved the association of Krishna from previous lives, occurrences in previous lives. There's so many. Almost every demon in the Krishna Lila, in the 10th canto, they have some connection from previous life. We can use one example of Putana, the very first demon that tried to kill Krishna. We know that in previous life, she was the sister of Bali Maharaj. And when Krishna came to Bali Maharaj in the form of Lord Vamanadev, a beautiful dwarf Brahmin boy, he was so attractive that the sisters developed a desire, I wish I could have a son like him. Right? So she had that affectionate mood. But later, as Lord Vamanadev fulfilled the purpose of his coming and snatched everything away from Bali Maharaj, and then punished him by pushing him down. Actually, he was benedicting him. But with his third step, he pushed him down to the lower planetary system, Patalaloka, and he was bound by the snake Vasuki. And when his sister saw this, I want to kill him. that desire came in her. So she appeared in Krishna Lila as Putana, who apparently had the outward show of parental love and affection, right? And she deceived everyone because she was a demoness, very powerful demoness, not ordinary, right? And Krishna understood, oh, she is coming, she has put poison on her breast, she wants to kill me. But she has this mood of mother, and he knew from previous life also. So then he sucked out all the poison and began to suck out her life air, right? And then she couldn't take him off, even though she was as strong as 10,000 elephants, it is described. You imagine 10,000 elephants' strength? And here's this tiny, tiny newborn baby, only a few days old, and she cannot pull him away from her breast. She's trying and trying. And she screamed, "Oh child, leave me, leave me." Krishna would not leave her because he came to her as mother. So then he kept on holding on, and she ran out, and her real form of a gigantic demoness grew into the sky. It was so like, what is it, 8 miles long, you know. And then she died. She crashed to the ground screaming. But Krishna was still there on her breast. And when the Brijvasis came, Mother Yashoda came, and Mother Yashoda saw, she climbed up on this big, huge hill of her breast and found her Krishna simply playing like that. And what happened to her? Oh, she received the position of mother in the spiritual world, in the outer area of Goloka, the planet Goloka Vrindavan. She received position of Datri, which means a nursemaid. Nursemaids are there in the Vedic culture, and they give breast milk to other people's babies, right? So she became a nursemaid of Krishna. And that's the example that is used by Uddhava in Srimad Bhagavatam. Uddhava, after he had heard the entire 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam from the lips of Krishna himself, just at the time of the disappearance of the whole Yadu dynasty, and now it was time for Krishna to also depart. But before he did, he arranged that Uddhava would come, and his very most intimate devotee, his intimate friend, and so qualified personality, so qualified that he had gone to Braj by the order of Krishna and spent 2 months with the gopis. And Uddhava prayed at the end of that I want to become a creeper. I want to become just some little bush on the pathway in the forest of Braj, where the gopis are walking, and one particular gopi. And I desire to have one dust particle. He prayed, can you imagine, for one dust particle from the lotus feet of a particular gopi. And who is that? Srimati Radhika. Asamaho charana renu, jushamaham shyam, vrindavane kimapi gulma latosha dhinam. Lata oshada means like a vine or a creeper or a bush. And I want charana renu, which is singular. So when she's walking by, I will have this opportunity. That is my prayer. He could not even fathom the extent of the gopis praying, even though he's considered to be practically the highest devotee outside of Braja. Krishna told, you are more dear to me, Uddhava, than anyone, even my brother, even Lakshmi Devi, my brother Baladev. No one is as dear to me as you, Uddhava. This is told by Krishna in Srimad Bhagavatam. Even myself, I am not as dear to me as you, he said. So, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj especially, he uses that example of Uddhava to illustrate how exalted are the Braja Gopis. And Uddhava's statement is the topmost proof of this, that they are so far beyond anyone else's praying, that even Uddhava, he said, let me just become a bush. I can get one particle of dust, you see. So that same Uddhava, it was arranged that he would meet Krishna by divine arrangement, and he would hear everything from the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Also, there was another sage who was there, arranged by Krishna. Who was that? Yes, Maitreya. He was older, Maitreya Muni. He heard at the same time, sitting nearby. But Krishna was speaking to Uddhava. So, after Krishna departed, then Uddhava went wandering. It was nearing the end of his time on the planet as well, and he was feeling such separation from Krishna. And it so happened that he was wandering and he ran into who? Vidura. Yes, Vidura. And then he spoke to Vidura, and Vidura was inquiring why you are looking so morose like this. Then he began to glorify the pastimes of Vrindavan, Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. That's there in the 3rd canto, in the chapter where Uddhava meets Vidura. And Vidura also heard from Uddhava that Uddhava had been there when Krishna, just before Krishna departed. So, and that he had heard all of this Katha from the lips of the Lord. So then Vidura wanted to also hear from him. But who did he suggest to hear from? Because Uddhava was much younger and Vidura was much older. Also Maitreya Rishi was much older. So Uddhava followed the position, the practice of avoiding Maryada Vyatikrama, which means to impertinently surpass a superior spiritual authority. So because of his age, like that, even though Uddhava was topmost, but Uddhava said, it will be better if you will hear the great sage Maitreya Rishi is nearby. You can hear from him. And then so much of the coming cantos are the discussion between Maitreya and Vidura in Srimad Bhagavatam. So one of those verses that were spoken by Uddhava to Vidura was the famous verse where he's describing how merciful is Krishna. How Krishna is so merciful. Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Radha Govinda Ji. Yes, he's saying, how can I surrender to anyone else other than Krishna, who awarded this demoness, this witch, Putana, the position of being his mother in the spiritual world? Who else could be as merciful as this Krishna? Trying to remember the Sanskrit. It's slipping my mind right now. Yes. Kimva dayalur sharanam vrajema. In the last line of this verse, he's saying, Kimva dayalur sharanam vrajema. How can I surrender to any other person who has a merciful nature, in comparison with Krishna's dayalu, his merciful nature, dayalu. I cannot surrender to anyone but this Krishna. And you know, in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, when Gadadhar Pandit was brought to meet the very, very great devotee, very, very exalted personality. Who was he brought there by? I'm forgetting. Gadadhar was brought to meet, to see him by Mukunda. Yeah, it was Mukunda. Yes. And what is his name? Pundarik Vidyanidhi. So, Pundarik Vidyanidhi, he was outwardly like a very wealthy Vaishya who lives in palatial surroundings, who wears and dresses in a very opulent way, and his hair is oiled with perfumed oils and fragrances and like this. And Mukunda had brought him Gadadhar Pandit to see. Do you want to see a great devotee of Krishna? Yes, I want to see. He brought him there. And Gadadhar was seeing all the sense gratification facilities. He's sitting on a very, very opulent bed and seat. And on top of all that, he's smoking a hookah. And Gadadhar, he had some doubt. Is this a great devotee? And so Mukunda understood that he had this doubt. So then Mukunda said, please observe. And he began to sing. He began to sing that verse. Aho bakiyam stanakala kutam. Aho bakiyam, the sister of Bakasura. Just see how this Putana was given the highest position. So he's singing this shloka from Srimad Bhagavatam. And the last line, Kimva dayalur sharanam brajema. When Pundarik Vidyanidhi heard this, a whole internal transformation started to take place like the eruption of a volcano. Recently in Hawaii, there was the eruption of the volcano there, and so much lava oozing everywhere, so many tremors. And his ecstasy upon hearing this shloka, Srila Sridhar Maharaj explains he describes that scene very nicely, how he began saying, calling out loudly, Kimva dayalur sharanam brajema. He became overwhelmed in ecstatic love and attachment for Krishna. And he began rocking back and forth and tearing his clothing apart. And everything, smashing everything in all directions. And then he rolled off of his bed onto the floor. And when Gadadhar saw this, oh, yes, I had some doubt toward him. Oh, that means I committed some very great offense. Oh, the remedy for that, I must become his disciple. And so, Gadadhar Pandit took initiation from Pundarik Vidyanidhi, one of the top most associates of Mahaprabhu in Chaitanya Lila. And who is he? In Krishna Lila, he is Vrishabhanu Maharaj, the father of Srimati Radhika. So very appropriate, because Gadadhar is Radhika. And then her guru is Vrishabhanu Maharaj. So like that. Now, yesterday we were reading the section of, I'm reading some of those words. A householder Vaishnava should perform spiritual practice with his wife for the purpose of attaining spiritual happiness. Spiritual happiness, right? Not material. That will be there. But spiritual happiness is the real aim and objective. So although engaged in such activities, he never becomes dominated by his wife. In this way, throughout his life, the fault of associating with women can never be attributed to him. This also is interpreted as women associating with men. It goes both ways. So, because this is the description of Bhaktivinoda Thakur on which types of unfavorable sangha must be relinquished, right? Yes. So he should completely give up both unrestrictedly conversing with women and his mundane mood of submission that results from fondness for his lawful wife. Now, I was going to say this yesterday, but we didn't have time. In the transcendental spiritual world, we know that the Supreme Lord exhibits so many different pastimes. And in many of those pastimes with the Braja Gopis, especially Srimati Radhika, what does Krishna do? He becomes controlled, right? He becomes controlled, right? And Srimati Radhika becomes Swadin Bhartrika. That's the term for a beloved who dominates her lover, right? And this is the most, makes Krishna more happy than anything. More happy than anything else is when he becomes controlled by Srimati Radhika's praying. And also the gopis. They can also control Krishna by their praying. But yet we see here that it's telling this is a fault for a householder Vaishnava.
We're not supposed to imitate Krishna, isn't it?
Yeah. But also, one time I was with Srila Prabhupada. In the first time I went to India in 1975, and we went to Hyderabad in middle India. And we were with him for 1 week because he was doing a Pandal program up on this stage. There was a few hundred devotees that actually came, Western devotees. And during the daytime, we would go to different wealthy persons' homes who were inviting Prabhupada to come. And so we had the opportunity to be with Prabhupada at a very wealthy industrialist's home. And he had a whole area where he constructed a big pandal tent for all of us to sit in and take prasadam, a few hundred devotees. And they're serving prasadam to all of us, right? And Prabhupada was inside the house, but it was very warm weather, hot weather. So they had all the windows open. It was a sitting room. Prabhupada was in the sitting room after he had taken prasadam. So he's sitting with the family members, right? And he's kind of like lightheartedly, kind of joking with them, And he told the story about Lord Ram, how Lord Ramachandra, he was searching everywhere for Sita Devi when Sita had been kidnapped. And we've heard before how he was calling out and weeping and crying, "Oh Sita, oh Sita." And he was asking the trees and asking the forest, "And have you seen my Sita Devi?" Right? There's another pastime that Prabhupada wasn't telling about how Parvati tried to come to him in the form of Sita because she had some doubt. How is he Supreme Personality of Godhead if he's like an ordinary human crying out for his wife like this? How is he Bhagavan? But when she came in front of him with her mystic power in the form of Sita, he saw her. She would stand like right in front of him, and then he would just turn the other way and he would continue. She began to realize, oh, he is Bhagavan. And when he saw her, then he called her, "Oh, my dear mother," Ram told. In the form of Sita, right? He told, "Oh, my mother." what are you doing here? And then she realized. And she had committed this offense of doubting his Bhagavata, that he's Supreme Lord. So later when she returned to Lord Shiva is all-knowing, he knows everything. And Lord Shiva, then at that point, he would never treat her as his wife, he would treat her as mother. And now she was so devastated that what happened. Actually, this is her first incarnation as Sati. Later she became reincarnated again as Parvati. But that whole description of Daksha's yagya, is it the 4th canto? Yeah, 4th canto. And how she wanted to go because Daksha is her father. But Daksha had a very negative attitude toward Lord Shiva. Very offensive, actually. And he warned her, no, you shouldn't go. And when she went, then they had this big yagya and all these demigods and all these personalities. And Daksha was insulting Lord Shiva. And when she heard that, she sat down and she said, now this body, because now Lord Shiva was only calling her mother. That was one mistake. And now she had disobeyed him and gone to the yagya where she was subjected to blasphemy against Lord Shiva, the topmost Vaishnava, and her husband. So she sat there, and through internal fire, she, what is it called? Immolate? Immolate. Yes. And she burned to ashes. Yes. So, Lord Ram, right, she had committed that offense against Lord Ram. And when she came back to Lord Shiva, she also didn't admit that. But Lord Shiva knew anyway. So now she was so devastated. So she left that body, and later she took birth as Parvati, the daughter of the Himalayan. Of what?
The mountain.
Yes, yes. So, anyway, Srila Prabhupada, he was talking about that pastime, how Lord Ram was wandering and crying out, and how in that whole pastime he had to undergo so much suffering because of his wife, Sita, because of the situations which had arisen, right? So then Prabhupada was equipped. Oh, you see? Always. And in any relationship within this world, there will be some suffering in contact with woman. That is unavoidable, he said. Even if you're Supreme Personality of Godhead, you will still have to suffer. And then the whole family was laughing, because Prabhupada was saying this in a joking way, right? So, but this principle here is for the understanding of Vaishnavas who truly want to advance in bhakti. And it's a very good principle, because if a householder Vaishnava becomes too much attached to his wife, like it says here, he should completely give up both unrestrictedly conversing with women and his mundane mood of submission that results from fondness for his lawful wife, because these will not be helpful in the path of spiritual advancement. So when both husband and wife are very serious Vaishnavas and devotees, and it's very clear, they understand that this is a partnership so that we can perform bhakti, right? But if at any time it becomes unfavorable, then it may be time for the man to renounce. Yes, I remember Gurudev was telling me personally that, no, this is a different circumstance. Yes, this is a different circumstance. But he did tell how when he left his home, he explained this to me personally. He said, when I left, because we know that Gurudev was something like 25 years old only, and he had 2 baby daughters, right? But this was topmost exalted personality, Gurudev showed all these symptoms and signs. There's so many stories. Even in Gurudev's Samadhi, they have the dioramas in Navadvip showing some of the stories and pastimes of Gurudev. We have a little book also. And Gurudev himself has told so many of the stories of how he met actually Srila Narottamananda Brahmachari, disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who later became Bhakti Kamala Madhusudan Maharaj, which his appearance day is coming, or it was just passed, I forget.
Just passed.
Yeah. And when he heard the Katha of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, now he became mad. He said, I became completely mad. And he became so absorbed in chanting Mahamantra that he completely lost external consciousness. And he didn't go to work as a policeman. And you know that pastime? What happened? You know? You can tell.
Promoted?
Yes. He was chanting. Isn't it that he wanted to chant 1 lakh or something?
Yeah.
Anyways, he was chanting and he didn't go to work that day. And there was like an officer who came or something to look for some files. And when Gurudev came to work the next day, he was commended for his work basically. And Gurudev realized, oh, Krishna is arranging everything. I don't need to stay here because everything is being arranged. That's the very creative version.
You want to add to that?
Well, yeah, just to elaborate, the district officer had come wanting these files.
Oh, use the mic, I forgot. Yeah, go ahead.
So the district officer in the police department in which Srila Gurudev worked, he had come from afar to search for a particular file. And of course Gurudev had seemingly not appeared at work that day, but when he came the next, he was commended that, oh, you immediately knew where that file was and got it. And so...
Yeah, he was expecting that they would be very upset that he didn't come into work. Gurudev was expecting that because at the end of his day of chanting, then he realized, oh, I didn't go. So he was thinking he's going to get fired and chastised and all that. But when he walked into the office, because in India, in the police state, they have stacks and stacks and stacks of papers. They didn't have computers in those days, and they had their filing systems, hundreds, thousands of papers. And they were looking, there was some particular paper that was extremely necessary for them to find. And so they were all very worried if they can find it or not. But when he came into work, they said, oh, Tiwari ji, you did so good yesterday. What you did. I said, what? Yes, you found that file. So you're so glorious, right? You saved all of us. And he thought, at that time, he understood. Because they all saw that this person, he came and he found that file. But Gurudev knew I was not there. I was at home. I was not there. So when they told him like that, then he realized, Krishna himself came in my form and he found that file. And Gurudev began to weep. So it became clear that Gurudev was not meant for the life of a householder and so forth. And Gurudev, after hearing all this katha, then he set his direction that he wanted to leave home. There's whole stories about his leaving and not succeeding and leaving and not succeeding, and then his family members even coming to try to bring him back. All these stories have been told. We have a little book from his brother, who also has passed away. He was narrating a lot of these stories of what was happening from the side of the family. But Gurudev told me, he said, because he was talking to me about sannyas, and he was saying, when I left home, I knew that Krishna will arrange everything. I had no doubt at all. And I never looked back. And then he said, and he did. Krishna arranged everything. His children and so forth, that whole arrangement was made. They grew up. His 2 daughters, they got married. Everything was arranged. So he said, you should be like me. I says, Gurudev, no one can be like you. So, anyway, Sangha Tyaga. Sangha Tyaga is essential for the Vaishnavas, and we have to know how to not associate with unfavorable association for our bhakti. Should be very, very careful about that. So then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur goes on and he begins to quote these verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, this is from the 1st canto, 2nd chapter, and he says, we find in the Srimad Bhagavatam the directives to be accepted by a householder Vaishnava. And then he quotes 4 verses. Verses 9 and 10 and verses 13 and 14 from the 2nd chapter of the 1st canto. I'm reading those verses. Dharmasya pavargasya nartortai upakalpate nartasya dharmaikantasya kamo labhaya hi smritaha kamasya nendriya pritir labho jiveta yavata jivasya tattva vijigyasa narto yascheha karma bhi. Then atakpun bir dvija shreshta varnashrama vibhagasha swanustitasya dharmasya samsidhir haritoshanam tasmad ekena manasa bhagavan sattvatam patihi shrotavya kirtitavyascha dhyeya pujas cha nityada. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is telling that in the above verses, it is mentioned that Trivarga is the only dharma of those who possess the qualification to perform karma. Now, what is Trivarga? We went over that.
Dharma, Artha, Kama.
Yes, Dharma, Artha, Kama are called Trivarga. And when liberation, moksha, Dharma, Artha, Kama, moksha is added to that, then it's called Chaturvarga. 4 pathways. But most people in the material world, they only have the qualification to perform karma, right? They're not even attempting to attain moksha, liberation. So, in the above verses, it is mentioned that Trivarga is the only dharma of those who possess the qualification to perform karma. Those who have become detached from this world, which is pervaded with karma, its pleasures and the pleasures found in the heavenly planets, headed by Svarga, those persons, they obtain the qualification to perform Gyan. So, first one is karma, because they only possess that qualification of Trivarga. Then, those who have become detached, they have some renunciation qualification, so they can perform Gyan. And for them, the rules and the regulations of the path of karma are unnecessary. Such persons are beyond the boundaries that are set for those who possess the qualification to perform only karma. So they're in a higher category. They have a higher qualification. They don't have to adhere to the rules and regulations of those who have the lower qualification. So, yes, they are eligible for sannyas that is characterized by dry gyan. So what is that sannyas? It's not talking about Vaishnava sannyas. It's talking about, those who are on the pathway of understanding Brahma Bhuta and the impersonal absolute and renunciation. But that renunciation is called Shushka Gyan, Shushka Vairagya, Falgu Vairagya, because it's not true renunciation. It's impelled by a desire to renounce so that one can attain moksha. So those who have faith in hearing topics about Bhagavan and in performing kirtan, having received the mercy of Bhagavan on the strength of heaps of sukriti that has gradually accumulated over many lifetimes, they are beyond the qualification for karma. Such persons are eligible to be called Vaishnavas. And among them, whatever is acquired by householder Vaishnavas who are accumulating wealth through the observance of Dharma is not for the fulfillment of their own desires, but rather it assists them in maintaining their lives in a pure manner that is favorable for the cultivation of bhakti. And it also assists them in their inquiry into the absolute truth. So you see, understand these points? You want to mention anything? So this is the difference. Bhaktivinoda Thakur making so clear. This is the difference between dharma, worldly religious duty, and paramartha, duties pertaining to the supreme goal of life. Param artha means to the supreme attainment. We know that the term paramartha is also used in relation to what? Shraddha. Paramartik Shraddha. This is what is necessary to come onto the pathway of bhakti. Ado Shraddha, Tatak Sadhu Sangha, Tabhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti. What type of Shraddha? Paramartik Shraddha. Not ordinary Shraddha. In the material world, we just read the Bhagavad Gita the other day, and the 17th chapter is called Divisions of Faith. And there it's talking about Shraddha. And how there's Shraddha in the mode of passion, in the mode of ignorance, in the mode of goodness, and so forth. So all living entities, they have Shraddha. Otherwise they can't function. They have belief. So Paramartik Shraddha is transcendental Shraddha that is obtained from heaps of pious activities, not just pious activities, but sukriti from previous lives. So here Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, this is the difference between dharma, the worldly religious duty, and the paramartha, the duties pertaining to the supreme goal of life. In order to maintain his life, a householder Vaishnava, along with his wife, must, while observing Varnashram Dharma, perform the activities related to material religion, economic development, sense enjoyment, and liberation, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. That householder Vaishnava has to perform them with the sole purpose of attaining Bhagavan's mercy. That's it. This is the difference. Many times in Prabhupada's presentation of Bhagavad Gita, he talks about the difference between one worker and another worker in a factory. They're like in a factory. He's using that example. They're working side by side. in a factory. But one of them is a Vaishnava, and the other is a Karmi. And he says they may be in the same place, in the same factory, doing the same work, but they are working completely on different levels. This is the difference. So, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is making this very clear, that the sole purpose of the observance of Varnashram Dharma by the householder Vaishnava is to attain Bhagavan's mercy. But if his home becomes unfavorable for spiritual practice, and if renunciation has thus arisen in his heart, then he will leave his home. That's the qualification here. Without that, cannot leave, unless the higher tendency has actually genuinely come into the heart. Otherwise, it will not be favorable. And also, he's telling if his home becomes unfavorable for spiritual practice. And actually, externally, it is not required for all householder Vaishnavas to give up the association of their wives. Because if both are very good Vaishnavas, it can be favorable. Or some distance, like in Vanaprastha, some periods of time, some distance, then developing more detachment. But if someone is a Vaishnava and they become very attached to Krishna, automatically detachment is already there. And if that situation is not unfavorable, or if the renunciation will be much, much more favorable, then that may be the time for that to happen. Oh, Gurudev, so many of our god brothers and older, bodily, in older age, and practically speaking, almost every one of them in Western bodies had gone through the different ashram, brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, and now Gurudev encouraging them to take sannyas. So sannyas is also important, but the real sannyas is internal. That is the real sannyas. And even if you compare a person who has taken sannyas but yet is harboring so many material desires and so forth. But there's a householder Vaishnava who is living completely absorbed every day, doing sadhan bhajan, and attached to Krishna, and executing still his duties, who is superior. That householder Vaishnava is in superior spiritual position. And it may or it may not come that he goes externally into the sannyas order, you see. So, by properly performing the activities of Trivarga, the Vaishnava's character quickly becomes pure. You catch that? Understand? By properly performing the activities of Trivarga, properly means what? In relation to bhakti and surrender to Krishna. Then the Vaishnava's character quickly becomes pure. And such a Vaishnava of pure character will faithfully hear, chant, and remember Bhagavan's names, form, qualities, and pastimes with undivided surrender. It is the duty of the householder Vaishnava to always perform spiritual practice together with his wife in order to attain the ultimate goal of life. It is also proper for the wife to follow her husband and perform spiritual practice for spiritual perfection, assisted by other women, such as any daughters she may have. In this way, the fault of associating with women will not exist. Therefore, whether practitioners are householders or renunciants, all are to give up the inappropriate association of women. By making this endeavor, devotees will remain far from such association. I'm using the last 3 minutes. 3 minutes. So the next section is titled The Bad Association, or Kusanga. Remember? Kusanga. That bad association of attachment and the different types of attachment. Now we are considering bad association in the form of attachment, asakti. Attachment is of two types. Attachment to that for which one possesses impressions, samskaras, and attachment to material objects. There are two types of samskaras. Previous means praktan samskara, and current, adunika. So samskaras there's two types. When impressions are produced as a result of the living entities performing the activities of jnana and karma under the influence of Maya since time immemorial, they are known as praktan samskaras. I remember Gurudev would use this term in explaining. He said, without praktan samskaras, no one can come to this path of Shuddha Bhakti. It is required. But here Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying that the impressions are produced as a result of the living entities performing the activities of jnana and karma under the influence of Maya since time immemorial. They are known as praktan samskaras. And these samskaras are known as one's swabhav, nature. It's a very interesting topic. We'll talk more about this tomorrow. But swabhav means one's nature. And is also described later in the verses of Upadeshamrita. How drishtai swabhava janitayar vapushascha doshayar. That the swabhav will be there as a result of the praktan samskaras, and that determines the kind of nature. In English, we say personality, nature, person's qualities. So here Rupa Goswami is telling that even if a pure Vaishnava exhibits certain qualities in his swabhav, right, in this particular body, maybe he even has a nature that is a little harsh. He uses that as an example. But just like the Ganga, even in the rainy season, is full of mud and whirlpools and foam. He says those who have pure intelligence, they never ever deviate from taking bath in the Ganga because of the mud that's swirling around. No, Ganga is always pure. So Rupa Goswami is saying, the pure Vaishnava, even if his swabhav, his nature, has certain qualities, one should still, with all faith, associate with such Vaishnavas and gain the highest purification and benefit, you see. So it's a topic of how everyone is born from previous lives, samskaras and so forth, and in this life, as a Vaishnava, now they can gradually become purified, but as long as they're in the body, certain qualities may remain there, but they're not unfavorable. They're not unfavorable for bhakti. So we'll read about that tomorrow. Now it's time for Gaur Artik and Radha Krishna Jugal Artik and worshipping their lordships here in New Braj. Vancha kalpatarubhascha kalpasindubheva Jai Shri Shri Radha Govinda Ki Jai.